Hello, 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 and welcome back to Bento Bureau, the show where we talk about Japan from an international perspective. Wishing you a very, very happy new year. My name is Basim. You can call me Buzz, and with me, as always, on the right side, my co-host, Mr. Bastian Harth. Good to see you, my friend. How did you
Good
spend
to
your
see
New
you
Year's
too,
Eve?
Buzz. Happy New Year to all of you. Glad that we are back in this 2021, which we can probably hope for a bit more, how should I say, less pandemic. We
Was
have some
pandemic-y?
less pandemic-y, yeah. We have some wonderful guests with us today who I'm really looking forward to talk to. I think it's a great start into the new year. And Buzz, I also hope that you had a happy New Year's Eve.
I did. I mean, my New Year's Eve, I didn't particularly do anything special. I stayed low on the low side. But on New Year's Day, I did watch the new season of Cobra Kai on Netflix. Quite frankly, I thought it was terrible. So it wasn't exactly a good start to my new year. But I'm really excited about who we're having today on the show. This is the highlight of my new year so far. Bastian, remember when we all came to Japan all those years ago? We were all excited
Sure.
about, the prospect of working and living there after graduating. And then later on, a lot of us at least, we ended up leaving to find work elsewhere, new opportunities. I think a lot of people I've met during my time in Japan have gone through the same thing. Maybe Japan, wasn't what they expected it to be. Maybe the work life scared them, or maybe they just couldn't find their place. I know I can relate to that personally. Maybe Bastian, you can relate to that too.
Yeah,
Why
I
is
can
that the
relate.
case?
I don't know what's up with that. For me, I definitely knew after the 4 years staying there that I love Japan. I love the country. That's why we're doing this podcast for sure. But I knew that I wanted to just do something else exciting. And now I really miss it. Being abroad again or being back in my home country. I miss it, and it's just a lovely country where I would love to work and live in again, actually, in the near future. So let's see if that's going to happen or not.
I,
But I
I
assume
couldn't
that
agree more.
you're relating it to our current guests who have been either abroad or who are not from Japan, but have established their life again there. Would love to bring them in
Exactly. Exactly.
now.
I mean, it's a really interesting point I've been wanting to discuss, which is why, we've brought in today's guests who I'm going to switch to now on the screen. You can see it is our utmost pleasure to introduce today's guests, Eri Ochiai and Heather Dobbin. Eri and Heather, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you guys doing?
Great, great. Thanks for
Good.
having
Happy New Year, everyone.
How's 2021 serving you so far? We're 9 days in. My one wasn't so great, but how's it been for you guys?
So for me, it's been great. We welcomed a new batch of baby software engineers on Monday, so started the new year strong, jumping straight into the deep end. And we've already had some highs and lows, but this is wonderful talking to both of you here tonight.
Thank you so much, Ari.
Yeah, same for me. I'm doing well. I think just being healthy and knowing that your friends and family are doing well, especially, given the time that we're in, can't take for granted. And, they're doing well and I'm doing well too. So I'm happy about that. Yeah, Tokyo's numbers are going up. So yeah, in terms of the pandemic, so that's kind of looking scary. But in terms of, everyday life, unfortunately, yeah, I think most things are working and we're doing pretty well. So yeah.
Ari, Heather, I mean, you've both been incredibly involved in helping the type of person I was describing in the introduction of the show. The type of person that struggles to navigate Japan or follow their own path. And you guys do a lot of consultation and work in HR with a lot of these people and coaching. I mean, share a bit about yourselves and how you came to this position and to come to pursue this line of work. Maybe Ari, we can start with you.
Sure, yeah. Where can I start? So maybe I can talk about what I do right now. So right now I'm a career coach at a coding bootcamp called Code Chrysalis. It's based in Tokyo. I came to that job because prior to that I was working as human resources in a tech company, and I interviewed one of the graduates just by coincidence, and I learned about the school. I thought it was really interesting, and I decided to join after that. Yeah, and I think even before doing this job, when I was working as HR in the company I was working for, there were many, many people who either we hired from abroad or they were already working in Japan who applied to our company. And yeah, as someone who has also lived abroad, I felt like it was my personal mission to sort of make sure they were doing well, not just, as an employee, but someone living as a foreigner in a country that can sometimes be hard, to be very honest. So I've been trying to do that. And yeah, right now I help out the very talented graduates of the program do their job hunt in Japan. So yeah, I guess that's about myself.
Thank you so much. So maybe we can jump to Heather now.
Yeah, so I've been in Japan for about the past 8 years. And before that, I lived in Busan in South Korea for 3 years. And so, something really interesting happened to me about 2.5 years ago. And that's like, as probably as many of your viewers and listeners are, I was in education, right? I originally came to East Asia as an English teacher, as I put in my bio for 1 year, right? So 10 years ago, geez. And so I, like many of us who are into English teaching, loved my students, loved my bosses, loved my coworkers, just loved what I did. And my partner was actually in the same company as me. But we just, sort of got to a point, and I think that this is the point where many people actually leave Japan and return to their home countries, where, we just really weren't seeing a future. And through some of the work that we were doing in publishing, my partner actually became interested in software engineering again. He has a CS background. And, he started applying for jobs. And, I'm sure actually many of our students and graduates have also had a similar experience, rejection. I'm sorry, you don't have the credentials, no, thank you. And so we discovered Code Chrysalis. And I was kind of a skeptic about coding boot camps, actually, to be totally honest, in the beginning. And so I thought, this is an expensive investment. Let's figure out, what this is. So we took the train down from Gunma Prefecture all the way to Tokyo, and stepped into the basement world that is Code Chrysalis, and met Jan and Kani. And, long story short, my partner ended up doing the program same day, kind of casually. One of the co-founders Kani was like, what are you doing after this? And so now I'm the Dean of Programs and Program Leads for the full-time immersive at Code Chrysalis. And I'm also the Mindset and Communication Coach. And I think that Eri and I cumulatively, or Eri's, she's sort of the end of the program and the future of the program. And I sort of nurture students through the middle of it and in the thick of things. We think we've helped over like 160 students now. I was counting it today. Eri, so otsukare-sama there. And through that, I actually realized I have a passion for coaching and a little bit of an aptitude for it. So I decided last year, actually in 2020, like so many of us, just reevaluating, sort of what I was going and what I'm good at and what I want to do in my future. And I decided to found Ikigai Me. Which I'd be happy to talk more about later, of course. So I am a communication and mindset professional and personal coach for the Tokyo software engineering community. So I do that through Code Chrysalis and also on my own as the founder of Ikigai Me.
We definitely need to talk about Code Chrysalis, and we need to talk about Ikigai Me. I think viewers can already understand that it's about coding, programming, software engineering. So that's good. They have the gist of it, let's say. But I'm more currently interested in both of your background stories a bit more, and then we'll move to Code Chrysalis. Heather, you've come to Japan? What was the reason why you came to Japan in the first place? And what did you feel during the time when you lived abroad, actually after you've left Japan? That would be something I'm curious about.
So I actually came here in, I think it was about 2012 for vacation. I was living in South Korea at the time, and I actually, I'm going to be totally honest with you, knew nothing about Japan. I am not a huge anime fan. I know, I'm sorry, everyone. I didn't really know very much, but when, we look close to Korea, hop on a boat, go to Fukuoka, have an adventure. And so we bought a JR pass and traveled all over Honshu during that time. And I was blown away by how orderly things are, how polite people are, how timely everything was, how clean everything was. Coming from a different background, I'm originally from the American South, from Atlanta, Georgia, actually. Yay, Georgia. I'll just leave that there. And so coming from like a very polite kind of hospitable society and then re-entering that in Japan, like having people, very crowded places bump into you and say, excuse me, having wonderfully clean toilets, all of these things. I was really, really impressed. And so I was already working as an English teacher at that time. And, we were kind of deciding to move somewhere else. And so we thought, why not give Japan a try? So originally I came here for work. Stereotypically wanted to move to Kyoto because it's just such a beautiful city, and found a job in Takasaki in Gunma, which is a shockingly lovely place. I recommend everyone visit there.
It is.
And just, I never left. I just sort of like put down roots and, formed my group of people here and, just sort of have transitioned into Tokyo. But I have to say, like, a big part of my heart, it still resides in Gunma for sure.
I have to say, I have to ask, like, it sounds as if you had a completely different experience of South Korea, though South Korea in my head is at least the same way as Japan in some certain ways. So, it's very clean, very structured, very organized, very polite people, but it seems as if you have experienced it a bit differently.
Compared with Japan, it's in a good ways at time. Definitely don't want to put down South Korea at all because I love, especially Busan, so much. It's more chaotic, right? So there is this idea of tatemae, but it's a more, I guess, like what we would call in Japan, like a more genki tatemae.
Like an Osaka kind of.
Yes. Actually, every time I go to Osaka, I feel like I'm back in Busan, to be totally honest with you. Like, you know exactly where you stand with people all of the time. There's a lot of like big voices and more, I think, directness that I'm used to experiencing in Kanto, at least. Yeah. So it was good, but it is, I would say that all of those things that you just described are to the nth degree in Japan and not really what I experienced living in a big city in Korea, to just to be totally honest. But it was a fruitful and dynamic and energetic time. So actually the tagline of Busan is dynamic Busan, and that's certainly true. If I go back there today, it's just like an unrecognizable place. The pace of change is just colossally fast. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I mean, sorry to rewind this back, but I mean, you didn't know anything about Japan before you came to live there. But what made you decide to, go abroad in the first place and leave Georgia for South Korea? I mean, what made you decide to take that leap?
It was actually a movie. So I don't know if anyone here has seen Revolutionary Road. I know we talked about it a little bit before, but it's basically, I don't want to spoil it because I think that everyone here should go out and watch it. Although I do have to say a little bit of a trigger alert. There are some kind of disturbing scenes in it. So, definitely bear that in mind if you go see this film. But, just the whole consequence of not living your passion, right? Like having dreams and not following through with them, and what can happen if you just sort of fail to do so and accept a mediocre but socially acceptable life. And so actually neither my husband or I had really like been abroad or could speak other languages to like any kind of good degree. And so yeah, that seeing that actually kind of scared the beans out of me. I don't want to say, I don't know what words we can use here. And, just we were both sort of lying in bed awake at night. So we just kind of realized, what are the consequences of staying here, right? Like, what are the consequences of not going abroad? Because it had been something we kind of lightly discussed. And my husband was doing an audio engineering business at the time. And, I had just graduated and I was looking for, work in psychology and social work fields. And, we were staring down the barrel of a very kind of typical lifestyle for suburban white people. And I was not really so interested in that. And so we just decided to throw caution to the wind and apply. And that's why we're here today.
Let me change the focus a bit. Eri, you've lived a long time abroad. What was your desire to go abroad and start a life there?
Yeah, so initially, or maybe I should kind of take a step back and say, I was born in Japan,
Sure.
but because of my dad's job, I had to move to different countries. So I never lived in the same house for more than 3 years, and we'd move from town to town, and that was just our life. So I kind of grew up already with that sort of mindset and sort of, having to adapt to different places. So I lived in Canada, I lived in the US, and I would kind of go back and forth between the US and Japan. Eventually I came back to Japan because I really wanted to go to school. I wanted to know what the other kids were like in Japan, because I kind of feel similar to a foreigner, like, I shouldn't say foreigner, but like someone who's like dreaming to live in Japan, because when I was like 13 or 14, I would, at the time, no internet, so I would be like looking for these like bookshops where sometimes you'd find like, just like Japanese like things, and I'd be so excited. And sometimes my grandmother would send me like packages, and I'd be like looking for things that, I can, like magazines, and, so I wanted to understand what other girls or people were like my age. So I moved back, I took tests, and I got into a high school. So from there I studied, I finished university here. And then in the meantime, I think I started to get, like, maybe it's itchy feet. I don't know. It's like, I was in the place for a long time, at least long for me, moving every 3 years. And I just wanted to get away from things and just be on my own. I really like traveling a lot. I've done backpacking on my own. So I started traveling on my own, and I think that's actually how I met my current husband. And I think having that experience, and then, yes, I backpacked, I came back to Japan, and then I eventually left Japan to go live in Italy to be with my husband. But my initial goal was actually to leave Japan anyway. So I kind of ended up in Italy because I had a reason to be there. But if it weren't for him, I would have probably chosen another country anyway. So yeah, that's probably my experience with being kind of outside of Japan. And now I'm back in Tokyo I've been here for 3 years. I'm feeling pretty good. I don't think I'm moving to
I wanted to ask, is it time to move again
soon,
now, or
which is kind of strange. Yeah. It's sort of strange, but yeah, I do feel like there's like a 3-year cycle like that's embedded in me. I feel it like every time I'm in a house, and maybe like it's like 2 years come by, I'm like, I'm getting really used to living in this house. Like,
I need to think
it should be a
about
good
my next
thing, but I feel
steps.
kind of like sort of.
I can definitely relate to
Maybe I get
that.
bored a lot.
I've been sort of a vagabond myself most of my life. Born and raised in the UK, came to live in the Middle East, in Qatar now. I went to study in Japan for university, and now I'm back here for work. And I'm already getting tired. I think the 3-year margin is quite accurate. I don't know if I'd be here in 3 years, so we'll see how it goes. But it's really interesting that like both of you have been through a lot of different situations, and you've took a lot of steps to come to the place where you are today. And you've been in a lot of different situations, a lot of different countries, a lot of different industries. So I'm really curious, what what made you, coming back to you, Heather, maybe we can start with you. What clicked in your head one day and made you realize, I want to help people who were lost like me, or in terms of navigating their path and achieving success, especially in a country like Japan, where, especially you in Heather's case, you haven't been living there all that long, but you've managed to, find a good place for yourself. You managed to make a living, and now you're helping other people who maybe were in that exact same situation or worse. And I've been in that situation. Maybe Bastian has as well. I'd love to come back to Japan one day, but that's the thing. I don't know how I'm gonna take those steps. So I'm really curious, what made you decide that, maybe coaching is for me, coaching other people, helping people in this way, finding their place. Maybe we can go with you, Heather.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I've been interested in psychology since I was a child. I knew from like a very young age that I either wanted to be a psychologist or an interior decorator. Like these two like very disparate career paths kind of mapped out for myself.
You can see that in your background. I can only just say it again. I love the flowers in your background.
Very nice. Yeah.
This is my family. Thank you, everyone, for being with them tonight. But yeah, so I knew that it was going to be my path to help people, and I chose English teaching as a vehicle for that because it afforded me, like I love that itchy feet, this way to go and experience things, but also to have a purpose, right? To have some meaning behind it, to be assisting people. And we do this activity at Code Chrysalis called tap outs, and it happens every 2 to 3 weeks or so during the course. And it's where we take a moment to kind of evaluate how far we've come and what we've achieved and what we want to do going forward. And I realized through these experiences that can sometimes be quite emotional, both for me and also for the students, where it's just like, I have so much writing on this, the tension is so high. And, I feel like I want to savor this experience, but there's also like a great deal of pressure for me to get a job after I graduate. That I was doing a lot of coaching and a lot of, not that I recommend this, but counseling, right? Just kind of being there and being a sounding board for people. And so I realized that this is what I had always sort of wanted to do and what I was actually doing when I was teaching, especially in Gunma. Just so many of my students would sit down and talk with me about their lives, and goal setting. It didn't have anything to do with grammar and vocabulary at all, And so I started looking into different fields, maybe going back to grad school and becoming a therapist. And that's when I discovered two things. One, the current state of mental health care in Japan, which is something that definitely needs work with. And then the other one is, positive psychology. So I don't know if you have heard a lot about that, but, a lot of people, when they think of psychology, they think about the disease model, which is treating traumas, helping people who have issues be, less unhappy, basically. And I was really attracted to positive psychology because it is the study of human potential, right? Like how people can be happy, right? How they can be fulfilled, how they can live meaningful lives. And so through positive psychology, I actually discovered the industry of coaching. So coaching is based on positive psychology at its core. And so I decided to become certified in that. And, that's sort of when I started learning about the concept of ikigai, which is a really beautiful Japanese concept that I want actually more people in Japan, foreigners and Japanese people alike, to kind of experience and understand. So that's how I got into coaching. It was sort of serendipity / destiny, I think, for me.
And that is, I assume, what also Ikigai Me stands for?
Yes. So my goal is to help people ikigai themselves. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think I had a bit of a lag here right now. So now both of you have basically settled down in Japan, and even though you both had kind of a bit of itchy feet, Eri maybe a little bit more than Heather, Code Chrysalis brought you both together. Can you tell us a bit more about what Code Chrysalis actually is? Who wants to start?
Should I talk? I don't know.
Sure, go ahead, Eri.
It makes more sense maybe that Oh, okay. Code Chrysalis is it's a Tokyo-based coding bootcamp. So if you don't know what a coding bootcamp is, it's basically a school where you, as someone who could be a professional or someone who's a student, would go to get very short-term but very intense training to become software engineer. I hope I'm like saying this the right way. Correct me, Heather, if I'm like saying something else off. But that's what we do at Code Chrysalis. The two founders are Kani Munidasa and Yan Fan, and they were in Silicon Valley, and they decided to create this coding bootcamp in Tokyo. So the school has been around for almost 4 years, I believe, 4 years this year. We have myriad of different students and people from different, walks of life who come in to take the program. Different demographics and also just professional backgrounds. We've had like ballet dancers, for example, who've, obviously become software engineers, recruiters, teachers. It's a wonderful place. It's also like what I really love about how I got interested in this school, as I said earlier, was I interviewed one of the graduates just by coincidence. And it was interesting because one day I got this application from this person, and on their resume, it said that they were an English teacher before being a software engineer. And they were applying for a full stack position that we were looking for. And I was really confused. I was like, how does one person apply to an engineer position when before they were a teacher? I was so confused at the time because over 90% of the candidates that I was looking at were, obviously bachelor's, master's, PhD, students, and I had never seen a resume like that. So I got kind of curious, and I thought, with my colleague, it's like, okay, let's see how it goes. When maybe this is a hit or a miss, but let's see. And it turned out it was a really great interview, and we ended up offering the job to this person. Unfortunately, we were not in time, and they had taken another offer from a company, and I missed the opportunity. And I was like, that's too bad. We spent so much time, I wish that person joined the company, but that name kind of stayed with me. So I learned about the company again after I talked to the CEO, Kani, and I learned that. So one of the things that I wanted to say was that one of the things that makes Code Chrysalis very unique is its culture. Although there is a very strong sort of influence, obviously brought from the two co-founders, as I would describe as kind of like North American or somewhat based on it. There's a lot of just different cultures, that's coming from the staff, students. Currently, we have English and Japanese programs. So we have students who are native Japanese speakers who want to learn English. At the same time, we also have non-Japanese speakers who are looking to improve their Japanese. So we have this mix of different languages and cultures going on that I really love. And I think it makes it a really interesting, exciting place. I hope I said that right.
So
you did great.
I think she did great, right? Yeah.
No, she did, yeah.
It sounds as if, so just to clarify, most of the people who apply for your bootcamp, your coding bootcamp, are people who are interested in either switching their careers or to also kind of, increase their career perspectives.
I guess I'll. So more than half of the students are coming from professional backgrounds that's not in software engineering. We also have students who are engineers, but basically these people are people who are working with technologies that are not as modern. So they come to our bootcamp to basically get hands-on experience and learn more about modern technologies, which is basically what we're teaching. So yes, we have quite a lot of, a very vast sort of variety of backgrounds.
How's the coding world in Japan actually? Like, are there many boot camps out there, or?
So in English language right now, as far as I know, and Eri, please correct me if I'm wrong, because you're also very knowledgeable about these stats, but I think that we have currently 2 English language versions available. And then a lot of smaller kind of Japanese language boot camps as well, but maybe not functioning as boot camps in the strict definition in the way that we would think of coding boot camps here in Japan. Eri,
more
did I
like
get that
just
part
a
right?
short course or something?
How would you describe our Japanese language competition, Eri? You're much more knowledgeable about this than me.
Yeah, so I think Heather's right. As far as I know, there's only 2, like I would say English boot camps that use English as their way of to teach. There are other schools. So I think the term programming school is much more common in Japan, and we see ourselves different from these schools, primarily because we focus really, so it's short term and it's very intense, very, very intense, and we don't guarantee graduation, which is a bit different from the other schools. So other programming schools in Japan will take complete beginners. They, almost oftentimes guarantee graduation and sometimes employment after graduation. And the way they separate or break down their programs is by language. So for example, there might be like a Python program or a Ruby on Rails program. While we don't do that, our program is to basically teach people to be software engineers. So it's not exactly like a language program.
We also have the focus on professional skills, right? So that's I think the other main thing that really distinguishes us from other coding boot camps, actually, and especially from these, the ones that Eri was referencing. So we don't actually, I wouldn't say that we strictly teach students how to be software engineers. We teach students how to learn and how to become lifelong autonomous software engineers. And, so I think that's the big difference, right? We do, of course, do a lot of scaffolding. We do a lot of like direct education, but more than what, anything else that we want our students to emerge with. I mean, it's great if you have competency in a language, but we want our students to be leaders. We want them to be collaborators. We want them to be self-directed learners. And so this is sort of what we have, and also great communicators, which is why we do I like to call it professional skills suite of our curriculum. It's more commonly known as soft skills, but I think that makes it sound like something that's an inborn talent, like a thing that people have or they don't have, like, only extroverts can be good at communication, for example, like this kind of idea. And so I really do think that in addition to the hard technical skills that we equip our students with, these collaborative skills and these communication skills and the learnings that our students graduate with in terms of their confidence and their sheer capability and grit, I think really distinguish us. And as far as I know, aren't really any other programs in Japan that focus on these things to that level that we do at CC.
That's really interesting. And you also said something interesting in the beginning of our conversation earlier today, Heather. You said, you were skeptical about coding camps in general and what they can provide for people. I want to touch on that actually, based on, now that you've spent time and, getting familiarized, and you've said all these great things about Code Chrysalis. Why were you skeptical about coding camps, and what's made you have a change of mind?
Well, the first thing, I'll be totally honest, when my husband was thinking about doing the program, they had 100% job placement rate. And I was like, no way. There's no way. Like they're 100% successful. That's ridiculous, And it was also the price. I kind of was a traditionalist, thinking you needed to go to university, right, to get these skills and to get the kind of cachet that comes with a degree. I mean, we see that a lot in all industries, but also this one as well. And so, yeah, that made me skeptical. I'm just going to be totally honest. And then meeting Yen and Connie actually, and seeing, I remember I was still a little bit hesitant because, it seemed too good to be true. These like super enthusiastic people, super passionate people, the stories that we were getting from the graduates, And then I remember I came on initially to help them kind of scale up their English communication program, because I think one of the biggest issues for engineers in Japan is the belief that they can't use English well enough to work. So we started with that. And I remember the first time I saw, they're going to be really angry at me for telling this story, but I remember the first time I saw them have a disagreement about something, and just being so impressed with the passion that both Jan and Connie brought with their perspectives. And then the way that they were able to resolve it so amicably and quickly. I had never seen people do that in the wild to quite that extent. And I think that's when I sort of realized, like, warts and all, like, this is a real place and this is a real program, and these people actually care about changing people's lives, not just the sausage mill of graduating people and putting them in the industry and taking their money. So I really started to feel that from the first disagreement that I witnessed the two of them having. And yeah, it changed my mind. And then there was my husband's face the first week he came back from the boot camp. We were living in separate cities by then because I was, again, it's expensive. And for people who come from English teaching backgrounds, it was quite a lot of money. So I actually had to keep working. And I was teaching kindergarten like 12 hours a day, which is not my forte. I love kids, but that definitely wasn't in my wheelhouse. I was doing it to make sure like we could make this happen. And I remember the shift in his perspective and the conversation that we had when I met him in Tokyo after that first week. Like, I could tell even just 1 week into the program, he was already a different person for the better. And of course, like, he got a job and his salary is much better now. And we're like, for our family, like, that's been a lot nicer and a lot more stable than it was when we were both teaching English. But even more than that, it was what he learned about himself that really struck me that first week there. So yes, this is what changed my mind about at least our boot camp for sure.
That's really fascinating to hear, actually, because, with coding, something as technical as that, I think it's fair to say a lot of people have an impression of the types of people who go into the tech industry. It's predominantly made up by men, as you know, and like, I would be really curious to know a bit more about what are the types of profiles of the people who are coming to, join a code camp, particularly in Japan, where, right now IT is being widely emphasized by leadership in Japan. They're saying it's the future, and particularly emphasizing female, involvement in the industry as well. Who are the types of people who are coming into Code Chrysalis and code camps in general in Japan? And that level of that integration of interpersonal development, interpersonal skills, people skills, is it difficult? A lot of them, do they struggle with that sort of thing? And how do you help them to find themselves like that? I'm really curious, because I would say I'm kind of technical myself. My interpersonal skills are wavering here and there. Sometimes I do good, sometimes they waver. So I'm really curious that, a coding camp, you find yourself, you develop your own people skills through coding. That's something that's really interesting to me. Maybe you guys can tell me a bit more about who are the type of people coming in.
The one thing that they all share is they're all highly motivated. But other than that, they're about as different from each other as you can imagine. We do have people who come in who are more of like the stereotypical, hyper-logical, mathsy kind of person, and people who maybe we perceive as being more introverted and a little bit less comfortable in a social environment. And then we have people who come from like PR and marketing and like nursing and ballet dancing, like Eri had mentioned. And so they really are like personality type wise spread all over the board in terms of what they're coming into. And I think
Wow.
that you made a really interesting point where you said your interpersonal skills waver. I mean, all of ours do, and so the point of having people skills is not like a set of behaviors or a performative thing. It's being able to be your authentic self, like who you are, but also treating the other person with kindness and respect and interest, right? And I mean, of course, we do have some students who join who haven't already, had those habits kind of inculcated. So, it is a struggle for some students, more others, the interpersonal aspect of things. But we have a lot of support from the staff and from the classmates. The social aspect of the cohort building at Code Chrysalis is really important. And so because they have the support of other people and they start to realize like they wouldn't make it through this experience except for having their classmates, I think that really starts to shift people. And I actually have had students return and say, the technical skills were great, but these mindset things and these communication things that I learned are what I'm using more in my job from day to day now. So yeah, I mean, it is kind of a struggle, but there is a lot of support and there's a lot of understanding. We accept all of our students for who they are and where they're coming from, and we're just trying to help them bring the best parts of themselves to any situation that they're in, not trying to mold a particular type of person.
I think that's the essential part, isn't it? That they are in a community or in an environment where they can actually grow. Because otherwise, if it's just really like a program where you have a teacher in front of you and you're just basically at your desk and you're kind of trying to translate everything what the person says in front of you to the computer, that would be not enough to build someone who has the skills of a software engineer or any kind of professional, right? So there needs to be the environment, the community. It feels like you're building that as much as like you're really trying to do that. And that might set you apart from other programs or others in general.
There is one surprising aspect that I forgot to mention, and it's that I've noticed that a lot of the women in our program are actually from Japan or native Japanese speakers, or people of Japanese descent who have moved abroad and then come back. And so I think that's very, very heartening, because you talk about women leadership in general in tech, right? And how this is something we're really trying to focus on, making the playing field more stable or level for everyone to bring their particular skills to something. But I have noticed that I think like in the current class that just started on Monday, all of the women are either native Japanese speakers from Japan or are children of people who come from Japan originally. I know, that's amazing. I'm so excited about that.
It makes me really happy.
So yeah.
I personally work in the cybersecurity field, right? It's not really programming, but it's still like, well, somewhere related to it. And we have the issue here in Germany that there are not enough female leaders, also children particularly, who don't know, who are not in touch with the technology. And I think that needs to happen. So that would be actually something I would perhaps give to Eri. How is the situation in Japan when it comes to promoting this kind of environment where you can actually learn coding or personal skills? But generally, like, how much is there support from the people, the government, from the schools to learn program, to learn coding, to learn this kind of software language, if I might put it that way? What do you feel? Because here in Germany, just give you an example, I feel like there's not enough. It just needs to be more.
Do you mean like support from like the public sector for like learning programming, or do you mean more like like as Heather was saying, the professional skills or just sort of like non.
I think of the programming side. Yeah.
Are you referring specifically to female leadership or just
Now
generally?
both of you are asking me questions.
No, I'm just yeah.
Well, my question is, I feel like there's not enough awareness of how to use actually these kind of like when it comes to new technologies such as AI, such as cybersecurity, all these topics. There's usually not enough awareness. There's not enough knowledge out there in the society, and it needs to be increased. And I feel like these coding or programming camps, boot camps, they would allow that to actually spread the awareness and allow people to understand the technology a bit more. And I feel like the government, but also just generally institutions, but also the society still lacks somehow the understanding, but also kind of the will to go in that direction. And I wonder how that feeling, I mean, it's just really based on your feelings, your own opinions, how it is in Japan. Like, do you think there's enough awareness on that?
In terms of tech skills and everything.
Tech skills, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I can't compare to Germany, but I feel like personally, I think there is quite a lot of awareness. So for example, talking about like education, so programming is going to be one of the mandatory subjects in Japan. And there's a new department also, whether it's working well or, apart from like all the details, the government has created a new department that's going to focus on IT. So definitely, I would say in the past few years, since I've come back to Japan too, so like past 3 years, I've noticed a change. And I feel like even for the younger generation, so something that's been happening more recently with our school too is there's more students who want to apply to our programs a lot more than before. So these are like students, Japanese students usually, or people who are studying in Japan, usually in universities, or sometimes even younger actually, who want to learn programming because they understand the value of it and also the importance of having that knowledge. So I think compared to where we were, I would say let's say a decade ago, definitely things are changing. I don't know. I can't compare, for example, how things are in the US. I think there's maybe some difference in region. But I do feel like things are getting better. And I think just the idea of someone trying to learn how to program, that's, it's something very simple. It could be like HTML or CSS, or just like nowadays, there's also like the non-programming type of, you can make a website without coding basically, but that's already a way for you to be interested in that subject and topics. I feel like it's becoming more and more closer to people's lives, and therefore there's more interest that's happening. What do you think, Heather, though? I want to know about your perspective too.
Yeah, I have a really weird experience from coming from the countryside to coming to Tokyo and seeing like what the difference is there. And I just remember like being in a classroom and trying to get more technology involved, right? In a private school as well. And hearing like about people's internet condition, right? Or about their internet situation, right? So I think that it is something that Japan is really, really focused on. And I think that's great. Like I'm glad there are all these initiatives being placed, but I do think that for this to be effective, the education system needs a really big overhaul. Just having worked like in education with kids and seeing how, just sort of, I guess, old-fashioned, like some of the teaching methodologies are, and you can apply that to learning English as well, right? So it's at the forefront. Better, I think, Eri, you're absolutely right, even since I've been here in the past 8 years. But we still have a long way to go.
You see, despite my unclear question, you did an excellent job in bringing it to the point. Thanks. I would be curious. Usually we all say that kids are faster in learning these things. Is that true? Did you experience that as well?
I haven't worked with kids like learning programming, but I will say, okay, so there is a basis for like brain plasticity being something that's stronger in kids, right, up until a certain age. So I do think that it is easier for kids to learn, but something that's really tough to quantify is the role of motivation in education, right? So adults, we have plastic brains too, believe it or not. I tell all the students this every time: you can learn. It doesn't matter if you're 14, 24, or 75, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my oldest student, I think, was like 78 years old at some point in my life. And so that was incredible. But yeah, motivation, I think, is a little bit more important than, I think, in kind of physical velocity when it comes to that. And, you know, the adults that we work with are highly motivated to learn. So they actually learn pretty quickly. 12 weeks to become a full stack software engineer is a pretty short time. But yeah, I'm not sure about highly motivated children, though. I suspect that, as with everything, like it just comes a little bit more naturally to them and a little bit faster.
I was just wondering, because they're, when working with professionals, I can see the motivation, but with children, I think it could be either curiosity, fun, or maybe the parents telling them, you need to do this. So I wonder.
Yeah.
You've been saying that the program is actually quite intensive, and 12 weeks sounds incredibly intensive, to be honest, to become a full stack software engineer. Can you give us a brief overview of how this schedule actually looks like? I'm curious, like how long are they in the bootcamp, like per day, and what do they need to do?
Eri, do you want me to take that one too?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
This is like what I do every time a student applies and they're like asking questions. So the schedule is from 9 to 6 every day, and we have 15-minute breaks throughout the day, every 90 minutes, and we have a 1-hour break for lunch. So we're not that brutal in terms of like the amount of time they have to be there. And basically what happens is the first 6 weeks of the course are what we call the lecture and sprint part of the curriculum. So they'll have 2 or sometimes 3 lectures in a day, and they'll have to work on sort of programming assignments with their partner, which is why we focus on communication so much, because pair programming is a really important tenet of agile software development. And so that's just what we do at Code Chrysalis. And so every day they learn a new technology or a framework, and then they just have to do something with it, right? And we have requirements that are sort of like little missions where they have to finish basic requirements, medium requirements, advanced requirements, and sometimes called nightmare requirements, which is why we can have a difference in skill levels above a certain point in the bootcamp, because there's sort of something that almost everyone can get out of it, right? And so then they do this repetitively. So sometimes they have like a day to finish one assignment, and then the next day they're onto something that is different, and just sort of the amount of information is really, really intense and overwhelming. And that settles down in the second half of the course, where we start focusing on team projects. So the first half of the course is all based on exposure, very baseline competency with the technologies and frameworks that we do. Time management becomes really important, because in the second half of the course, they spend most of their time working in teams. There is a week where they have to teach themselves another language and build something in about 4 days to at least a minimum viable product stage. And so yeah, it is intense. It is quite intense. But what happens is, sort of without students being aware of it, while being overwhelmed, being exposed to the same concepts again and again and again, and having the chance to practice these different skills and implement these technologies in different contexts again and again and again, either on a solo level. So we do have a couple of solo projects where students are really responsible for managing their own time, or with the team level dynamic, which is where they have like a tech lead and they have to sort of negotiate who does what. And it's more like mirroring working in a small startup. So that's sort of what their day looks like. We highly encourage our students to have things like sleep, exercise, healthy diet. And we have noticed that in certain cohorts, those students do choose to spend a long time at school or working. So sometimes working until 10 at night, because again, they are all highly motivated people who get used to being in a flow state and don't like to give up on problems easily. But we do have a rule for our school: you cannot sleep here. Even though there's 24-hour access to the building, we don't want to come in the morning and find that you've been here all night. So
how do you, I mean, you guys mentioned in terms of profiles, you guys get a lot of diverse backgrounds of people working in PR to they're already familiarized with the tech industry and stuff. I'd be really curious, given the teamwork component, how do you mix these types of profiles together, and do they approach problem solving in different ways of thinking, and how do you kind of balance that if there's any kind of like gap of understanding between these types of profiles? I'm really curious how you guys approach those sort of things.
I mean, that's a great question too. So we use the Feynman approach to educating. Basically, if you can teach something, you know it really, really well, which is why we do kind of pair people up with a mixture of, I would call it previous expertise, right? Experience in the field. So we actually create the teams, the instruction staff does, and we kind of get together and we talk about, how students have done thus far, who gets along with who pretty well, who's a good mix, maybe who are people we might want to either pair together because they need to learn how to work with people who are different than them, or maybe, kind of we're looking for a little bit more harmony, but we look for things like communication skills, design ability, which is really like kind of aesthetic sense, which is kind of important because most of their projects have to have a front end, right, which is the part of the application that users interact with. And so everyone wants to have something that's somewhat beautiful. We also, like, I think maybe I mentioned it, leadership ability, design ability, hard technical skills, so like background and velocity in terms of learning these things, and also someone who's good at organizing others, right? So we try to make sure each one of the teams has at least one person who's good at all these domains. And what we find is, since we started looking at it this way, that we've had some just amazing projects. And so people who maybe had like a really high level of technical ability emerge from, particularly the final project, with some really good project management and communication skills. And that people who were maybe, sort of proficient in those things emerge from this project with a little bit more technical expertise than they would have gotten if we had not paired them with those individuals. So I'm not sure if that's the question that you were asking, but this is sort of our process in terms of pairing people.
That makes sense to me. That's really interesting. I'm quite curious myself about the program, to be honest. I mean, I've always wanted to get into code, but I really like the added component of just, developing your own, human skills in general. That's really intriguing to me. Maybe I'll have a closer look at the program myself. But, we've been talking a lot about tech and the coding camp, but, since I'm a little bit conscious of time, but there's so many things we can talk about, right? So, maybe we can come back in a couple of months and talk about more things. But, just as just one more question, maybe I can wrap things up with, in terms of, going back to the subject of people finding their place, navigating Japan. Maybe we can talk about it in the umbrella of Heather, what you're doing with Ikigai Me, for instance. I mean, what would you say to the people who, tried to, assimilate into Japan, find their own place in Japan, and it didn't work out, they were lost, or they couldn't, figure it out? What do you think were the main obstacles in their path? Do you think it's something like, just in terms of the culture or people skills, or and what would you say to those people in terms of, making things work if they wanted to give it a second chance, or they wanted to come back to Japan, try to find their footing? What kind of advice would you give? And this can apply to both of you, just to someone who's trying to come back to Japan and make things work out.
I have two quick things, and maybe Eri, you have a different perspective after this. But the first thing is, I actually gave up on trying to assimilate into Japan a long time ago. I think that's something that, as a foreigner in any country, like of course, you need to be respectful of the culture that you're living in, right? And understand it. But you bring a unique set of strengths and skills and perspectives. And that makes the culture that you're living in richer. So I would say my first piece of advice is create your own community and be yourself, right? Don't necessarily worry about fitting in, because in Japan, I think more than most other countries, just to be brutally honest, that's really tough. And so that leads me on to my second point, which is be honest. I used to think that, I wasn't able to share my experience of what it was like being a foreigner in Japan with people in Japan, and how, however well-intentioned some of the things that people would say to me or treat me as here in Japan, that was just something that was inevitable, right? Like this idea that Japan is not going to change. And even as recently as over the New Year's holiday, I've had some experiences that just prove that perspective dead wrong. So study your communication skills, be really respectful and mindful, but do give the feedback about what it's like for you to be here. And so just be honest about your experience with people here. And if you're doing these two things, you can find a place for yourself in Japan. And it's not a matter of finding it, it's about creating it, I think. And there are more opportunities here to do that than people might be thinking.
Thank you so much. Eri, you want to jump in here?
Yeah. Wow, you set the bar really high out there. I think maybe advice that I can give from someone who works as a career coach, working with people who are job hunting for, jobs in Japan, as a foreigner many times, is the first thing is don't assume that there is a way to get a job. This is something that I've also learned myself. If your goal is to come to Japan and work here, that's your goal. So it doesn't mean that you have to apply to companies. Yeah, it doesn't mean that you have to talk to recruiters. There are many, many ways to find a job. That's something I have also learned for myself in my life. For example, now I work at Code Chrysalis, but I actually never sent my resume. I mean, they asked for it, so I sent it later on. But I took the first, I actually asked them, are you hiring? Because I want to work with you. Basically, that was what I said. And they said, oh, yeah, well, actually, we're looking for someone. So great timing. And that's how I got the job. And I feel like also as someone who's lived outside of Japan as an expat, that sort of attitude that you are the exception. Like, you're not supposed to just follow other people's path or just copy what other people did. You just have to sort of take it that there is no path that has been paved for you. And I think that is kind of like the thing that we people who want to work abroad or, live in different places enjoy, but also are a little bit afraid to start doing. I can also admit that initially when I first started looking for jobs in Italy, it was not easy and I was really afraid too. I was not sure what I'd find and I wasn't sure how long it would take. But in the end, it worked out. And I think the second point that I also want to give relating to that is, like what Heather said about being honest, I think you need to let go of your pride sometimes. I've also seen people who, come from certain educational backgrounds or certain professional backgrounds who say, oh, I want to work in Japan, or I want to come to Japan and find work. And sometimes, there are assumptions there that probably come from the way you were brought up or the background of, how you became who you are. And I think moving to a different country is a very big step. And I think you have to kind of break out of your shell and let go of things that are holding you back. And most likely there are things that are holding you back if you feel like you're not getting anywhere. And I think it's facing yourself and your own fears is the very first step that you can take to start, reaching out to people, cold messaging people, asking them, are you looking for someone? All that will come after that. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I would say those are the things I would give as advice.
I might open up actually another topic in this case, but I still want to ask, Eri, was there a time, and since Heather touched upon it as well, was there a time where you want to assimilate into the Japanese culture again? And like, was there a desire to do so? Do you feel like, have you assimilated in the Japanese society now? If you had the desire to really do so? And if so, what were some challenges? I know 3 broad questions, but I'm sure you can answer them.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. That's really interesting. So yeah, I think I feel like it's not a state. Like I feel like assimilating is like sometimes it changes from one moment to another. At least this is how I feel. There are certain moments or certain situations where I feel like I find myself trying to assimilate more than I usually do. And I think I think maybe, I don't know, Buzz, I don't know about you, but I feel like for people who have grown up in different cultures, when they're young, you start to kind of sort of objectively analyze what's happening to you. At least I do this a lot, I think. I'm like, sometimes I'm like talking to someone, or, maybe I'm like, I don't know, just having like a conversation, and I find myself acting in a certain way that I'm surprised, like by myself. And I'm like, oh, like I'm acting a bit more Japanese than I usually do. And then like sometimes I think back to it and I'm like, oh, like that happened. I wonder why.
I can definitely relate to
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I can
Does that
definitely.
happen to you?
All the time. I mean, when I came back from Japan for the first time, even my family were looking at me. They're like, "You're acting very Japanese." I don't know if they know what acting Japanese is really like, because I don't think most of them have been to Japan. But according to them, I was acting more Japanese. But I guess we do kind of alter our behavior based on where we are, what we've learned, our experiences. They all make up who we are. So that's a really interesting point. And I do think of those things. Yeah, I reflect like, I do alter my behavior based on where I am and who I'm talking to. That's very true. Yeah, as I guess it's a thing a lot of us international vagabonds experience, traveling around the world, and we're not used to living in one place. We just kind of pick things up wherever we're going and we take them with us. So yeah, that is a very interesting point. And what a wonderful way to end the show. I mean, there's so much we can talk about.
Is like, it's I think it's a big topic. I feel like as someone who is my passport is I have a Japanese passport, so I'm Japanese, but like it's like I think the idea of like, what does it mean? Like, when we imagine someone who's Japanese, what does that person look like? What are they like? Like what are their like habits? And I think the ideas are still there, and I feel like it's changed. I would say, I would say it's changed a lot. I feel like that's why I can live in Tokyo today without feeling too pressured by society to act in a certain way. It fluctuates here and there depending on who I'm with and what I'm talking about. But I think it's gotten better. And something I really enjoy actually now that I'm in Japan again is seeing the younger generation. I feel like there are more people who are embracing individuality, and they express themselves, by their clothes or, music. And I feel like that has changed. I didn't see that like in my generation, or maybe, before that, a little bit after that. And I think saying that, I think I'm very hopeful that, that sort of pressure to become what people define as like the correct way of being, or like someone who's Japanese. I think that's that's changing. So yeah, I'm happy to say today I don't feel too pressured to fit in.
I think this is, for me at least, the perfect ending for this episode. It's kind of like from Heather and Eri, you two have given us a teaser of some upcoming episodes, which are topics we can definitely take with us. Thanks so much for being with us today. It was a pleasure to talk to you, to get to know you a bit more, and we hope to stay in touch. Of course, for our viewers and future listeners, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to send them to us. We will make sure to give them to Eri and Heather. Definitely check out Code Chrysalis. I've posted the link to Code Chrysalis in the comments. Also check out Heather's Ikigai Me. The link is also in the comments below. And we look forward to someday, hopefully, to welcome you again on a different topic. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. And yeah, on the
Thank you
topic,
so
we didn't
much.
talk much about Ikigai Me, but you can book a consultation and talk to Heather directly. So highly encourage anyone who's interested to go ahead and do that. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for everyone who joined. And thank you, Heather, Eri. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks so much for tuning in. And please like and subscribe to Bento Bureau if you haven't done so already. Have a lovely Saturday, everyone. This is Bento Bureau signing off. Bastian, let's do it. Coach So Samadeshita, Bento Bureau signing off. That was very cheesy, I know.